Welcome back to All Things Money. I'm David Blain, and today we're talking about a little bit about some of the problems in the pension arena of state, local, and city governments. And in our final segment, we're going to talk a little bit about China. A listener had a good question about China. We're going to address that. But for now, we're talking about the big $3 trillion at least unfunded state, local, and government pension plans. As I mentioned last segment, a lot of this problem is due to overpromising benefits that employees don't contribute anything towards. And the second half of the problem is that the planners at the state level, or the consultants that they hire, whoever, they're using unrealistic discount rates. And the discount rates is comparable to the expected rate of return on the fund's assets. And so the state every year will contribute money to this pension fund, and they invest it in stocks, bonds, whatever, and they expect to achieve a rate of return so that when that worker 30 years from now retires, that money that they put in there 30 years ago has also grown so that they can pay out those liabilities. The problem today is that the rate that they're using, a lot of pension plans are still assuming an 8-9% rate of return on a mix of stocks and bonds. It's simply not realistic. That a 50-50 mix of stocks and bonds, a more realistic assumption, if you wanted to be sure, more realistic, would be somewhere around 4 to 5% rate of return would be more realistic. Of course, pension plans are tax exempt, and so they don't have to pay tax. But still, clearly an 8 to 9% return assumption is unrealistic. Some of the estimates, what I'm quoting from mostly is the National Center for Policy Analysis. They just released a new policy study on the unfunded liabilities of state and local government. And they estimate that the unfunded pension liabilities are about $2.5 trillion compared to the reported amount of $493 billion. Health and other benefits, $558 compared to $537. And so the total unfunded liabilities is about $3.1 trillion, and this is about 3 times higher than the plans report. Remember that the plans are required to report, and they report to their state Congress or senators and to the public, and they use these discount rate assumptions. And so if they assume a 9% rate of return, they say, oh, well, our plan is fully funded. But if the rate of return is actually going to be closer to, say, 4 or 5, there's a huge gap. And so that's the issue. That's the issue that we have here. It's the dollar amount in the pension plan for most local and state governments is countable, and we do know how much it is. It's the assumptions that lead, in my opinion, to faulty conclusions. If we look at, there are several different ways to estimate a discount rate and different ways to make these assumptions. I have in front of me several different studies. There's a Social Security discount factor, which is a similar rate to they use for Social Security. You could use the Treasury yield curve. Look at what Treasury bonds are yielding on the yield curve. There's some other adjustments to the yield curve. There's the 2 other studies, a public fund survey and the Pew study. And so the public funds survey and the Pew study, which are probably the most liberal, biased towards what the state reports, they're reporting somewhere in the high 80% funded rate. If you get down to some of the Novi Marks adjusted Treasury yield curve, they estimate only 37% funded. So you can see that my point in this is not which one is right or wrong, but that there's a wide disparity in how much of these plans are funded. And so the prudent state, I would think, would want to estimate it low and make sure that they have the funds that they need to pay their retiree and health benefits instead of making unrealistically high assumptions. So like I said, many state and local governments are using these high discount rates, and they're carrying these liabilities for the taxpayers. As we jump to North Carolina specifically, I know a lot of you are interested in that. This study here estimates that they have about $62 billion in unfunded pension liabilities, or about 16% of the state domestic product. So all things considered, the national average is about 22% unfunded. So in North Carolina, we're a little bit lower than that. Now, though, as a citizen of the United States, you've got to consider when California, with $491 billion of unfunded liabilities, or 27% of its state GDP, when they get into trouble, or when New York with $246 billion of unfunded liabilities at 22% of GDP, when these states start to get in trouble, as the taxpayer, you got to think that the federal government is going to step in and try to bail these people out, and so that's going to come back on all of us. And so if California starts having problems, I think it would be naive to think that that's not going to affect us here in North Carolina. So even though North Carolina is below the national average as percent, and certainly the dollar amount is not anywhere near some of the larger states either, it's still something that we need to be concerned about here locally as well, because if some of the larger states get into trouble, it is going to affect it. When we come back, we're going to be talking about China and some of the things that are going on in China today. Maybe a little bit different view than you've heard before. So we're going to take a break now for All Things Money. I'm David Blain, and we'll see you in a few minutes.